Now, as we just heard, the government will release another defence white paper in just a few hours. It's expected to spell out a fresh vision for Australia's defence and its response to China's rising military power. David Johnston is the opposition's defence spokesman. He joins us now from Melbourne Airport. Senator Johnston, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
What do you see as the top priorities in this defence white paper?
Well, I think credibility's got to be the first thing. This minister has unfunded $200 billion worth of defence spending over the last 4 years. That's a question on notice that he answered himself personally to me. He's taken defence spending as a share of GDP back to 1938 levels. This minister can't paper over the cracks with all of the spin about other countries cutting defence. He's just taken $25 billion out of defence in the last 4 years, and he's going to take some more in this coming budget. That's why we're doing the white paper today. OK, well, let's look forward. If the coalition was to win in September, will you, as promised, look to increase defence funding? We certainly will look to increase it, but let me say, with more money coming out in this budget, the black hole, the depth of this mine shaft that we're going to have to crawl out of is anybody's guess. They have just taken a blowtorch to the defence budget and to the resourcing of defence. There is a real big problem here. OK, just going back to the question though, Senator, the coalition says it aspires, and that's the word, a relevant word, yet has an aspiration of increasing defence spending from about 1.5% of GDP, where it is now, to 2%. How strong is that pledge? Very strong, because when we left office in 2007, we had about 1.97% of GDP going into defence. All of the projects you're talking about today on your program were John Howard programs, Brendan Nelson and Robert Hill programs. There is nothing in the pipeline for defence in the future because this minister has done nothing. Now, we've got a huge problem. Tony Abbott and I have sat down. We've decided no more cuts to defence. That's the beginning. And that's a very important step. No more cuts to defence. Now, from there, we'll cauterise this hemorrhage and start the repair of this portfolio. They've left it in an absolutely shocking and disgraceful state. OK, you're just taking that one step forward. Would a coalition government, if elected, put your own white paper out? We will, and we've promised to do that within 18 months. We'd like to under-promise and over-deliver. We supported the 2009 white paper with 3% annual growth. Our track record is very, very clear that we are supportive of defence, and we'll set about the task of refinancing it as soon as we are able. Now, looking at some of the issues, the Defence Minister, Stephen Smith, and I think everybody would agree, we don't want our defence capability compromised. What would you do in his situation faced with, for a start, this ever-delayed Joint Strike Fighter project? Well, first of all, we wouldn't have made the cuts and taken all of this money out of defence. That's the first thing. The Joint Strike Fighter is a tremendous regionally dominant capability. We want to get back into that as soon as we possibly can. But as I say, the books aren't closed yet. There's more money to come out. He refuses to rule out further cuts. What sort of a mess we're going to inherit is anybody's guess. So you'd be committed to buying up to the extra 100 Joint Strike Fighter planes? We have said so when we supported the 2009 white paper. Now, as a stopgap measure, we look as though we're going to get some more Super Hornets announced today to bridge that air defence capability gap. Is that something the coalition supports? Well, we want to see where the money's coming from. But in principle, David Johnston, is that something the coalition supports? Well, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. That's the point. I'm not prepared to make these grandiose promises without seeing where the money's coming from. And today's white paper is going to be very long on spin and very short on factual financing. And that's a real problem for any new government. OK, well, if there's no Super Hornets, if you're not committing to Super Hornets, how would you bridge that gap? Because the Joint Strike Fighters, sure, there is going to be some delay in getting the full batch. Look, Super Hornets are a very fine aircraft. They're an obvious choice if we have a capability gap. Now, the Chief of Air Force is going to have to tell me that we have a capability gap and we need this aircraft. 12 Growlers, that is electronic warfare aircraft, are very effective. I'm very taken by them. I think they're regionally dominant. There's something I'd want to give support to. But the question is, where is the money for this? Now, one of the overarching themes of this white paper is winding back that pretty strong rhetoric towards China that we saw in the first white paper. Is that something you'd endorse? Absolutely. I thought that the bellicose rhetoric of the 2009 white paper to China was very foolish and something that we just wouldn't have done.
OK, David Johnston, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Michael.